Hi, and welcome to the Captioned Life, a show for the most casual and dedicated fans of comics and a member of the Comic Watch family. I'm your host, Sean. Join me and discover what the world of comics and graphic novels have to offer. From one-on-one interviews with industry professionals, roundtable discussions with passionate fans, and reviews on the latest comics, TV shows, and movies. Now let's dive right on in. Thank you for joining us. If this is your first time, thanks for checking us out. And if you're a returning listener, thanks for coming back. We just wrapped up Thanksgiving, which means we're getting into the Christmas and holiday season. If you don't know this about me, I am a sucker for the holidays. It's my favorite time of the year. I love celebrating it. I look forward to it. I go all out. I get all the food, the snacks, the decorations, everything that's associated with this holiday. And since I have a podcast about comics, you bet I'm going to do an episode about comic book issues that are centered around the holidays in some shape or form. And as always, I love to invite a guest on the show to share some of their thoughts about the topic. So please welcome Matt, aka Bumpkins. Bumpkins is a comics fan of over 30 years and a lifelong fan of almost everything in the nerd realm. Matt, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing okay. Thank you for joining us. And for our listeners don't know, Matt is actually joining us at the last minute. Had a couple of issues with our previous guests where they weren't able to join us tonight, and everything's fine. It's just there was some miscommunication and everything, but Matt was able to jump in at the last minute. So the fact that you had like hardly any time to prepare for this, because I know you've been busy tonight, I really appreciate you jumping on to talk about some of your favorite holiday comics. So I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I hope I'm not taking too much of your Sunday night away from you.
No, not at all. I appreciate you asking. Like, this is I love hopping on and talking comics with anybody.
Yeah, and for those of you who are not watching this on YouTube, Matt and I are both actually decided to show up in comics theme, ugly sweaters, and Santa hats, and so I'm wearing.
And
this
was not planned.
Yeah, it wasn't planned. We just both showed up like this, and so we thought that was great. I'm wearing a Deadpool ugly sweater, and then Matt is wearing like a long sleeve shirt of Marvel themed Happy Holidays ugly sweater type of style. Yeah, that looks great. So I feel like we're in like good spirits here. The fact that we had a similar thought pattern there.
Definitely.
So, well, before we jump into talking about comic books that are centered around holidays, I always like to ask our guests, what is your comic book origin story? What was the thing, the event, the person that got you into comics, and what made you a comic book fan today?
Yeah. So, I grew up, I'm a child of the 80s, and, back in the 80s, we had all kinds of cool stuff, toys and, video games, things like that. And, I was always into superheroes, because just like a lot of kids in the 80s, where I had all the action figures and everything, my mom would buy me a comic book here and there all throughout the 80s, and I would read them. And I've got some small like Spider-Man comics I got out of a pack of High C that I read over and over and over. So I was always familiar with comics, but it wasn't until it's actually funny. It's, usually it's like, oh, I saw, you'll hear somebody say, I watched this movie or this cartoon or whatever. For me, it was 1991. It was the Marvel Series 2 trading cards.
Yeah.
That a friend of mine had just a ton of them, and he had a whole bunch of extras that he just let me have. And I was looking through them, these trading cards. I was like, I don't know who any of these people are other than like the basics, like Spider-Man and Captain America and Iron Man. But I was like, who is Wolverine? Who is Captain Britain? Who is Vision? And I was like, I don't know who any of these people are, but I want to know everything about every single one of these cards. And luckily, my town had a comic shop, so I just went in there and just bought some stuff. I had some Spider-Man comics, so I kind of started there. But then picked up Wolverine and Avengers, and it just kind of snowballed, and it was harder in the 90s because we didn't have the internet, so it was harder to find information about who these people were and stuff. But just over the years, I just never stopped. I just like started loving them more and more and more, and I bought more and more and more and read more, and it just never went away. So I mean, thanks, and I still have those trading cards too, that full set of my original Series 2 cards. And I will never, somebody could offer me like $10,000 for them and I wouldn't sell, because without those cards, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't know anything about comics. The sentimental value is off the charts for me.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, and what's interesting, as you're saying that, it reminded me of my own childhood, of where I would go to an actual store that was specialized in trading cards, basically. Like you could go to a store and they would have like packs that you can buy, or if you wanted to buy more of the high value ones, they have them in the case and stuff like that. So I remember going there, I think, every weekend, every other weekend, not only looking for, baseball cards or hockey cards or NBA cards or things like that, but they had things like what you said with the comic book characters and just little, collectible items of different properties that are out there as well too. And I think that they don't exist anymore. Like those stores don't exist anymore, at least not around where I'm at. And if they do, it's not just trading cards. It's usually like collectible hobby items or things like that.
There's a lot of Funko Pops and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's interesting. Like the things that made up our childhood has like either disappeared or they morphed into something completely different. So thinking about how to explain this to my own kid, what a trading card store looked like and what they did, and probably them asking like, why would they just do trading cards if, they could also do all these other things and all that. So, but that's interesting. I will say that I think of all the people I've had on the show, that story is probably the most interesting in terms of what got people or what got somebody involved with comics was trading cards. Because I don't think anyone really had mentioned something of that value or of that nature. Because the closest has been like the X-Men animated series. Like something in TV or film that got people into, which was very, I would say it's probably more common than people think of. That's how people got into comics, but trading cards is a new one for me. So that's a really cool story.
Yeah, it was just I remember I spent the night at my friend's dad's house, which is when I first got him, and I remember that like that is burned into my brain, like what Wolverine versus Sabretooth, because they had like the little subgroup of like arch enemies and stuff. I was like, who are these guys? Why are they fighting? I don't know, but I gotta find out. And I was just enamored with them.
Right.
Yeah, they were great.
Well, before we get into the comics that are centered around holidays, we were talking off the air a little bit about Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. And I know a lot of our fans have probably listened to this already and have, I'm sorry, not listened to this, but they probably I know a lot of our listeners probably watched it already. But those of you who haven't watched it, if you want to skip like the next 5 or 10 minutes so you don't get anything spoiled, that's totally fine. But I wanted to ask you, what were your thoughts about that special? What do you think about it as a whole? What were your favorite parts? Things like that. I thought maybe we could have a short discussion about that, since that's something that everyone's been talking about.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. Like I loved every second. The only part I didn't love was when it was over. I could have watched a full length movie of that. It was just like I like laughed out loud, literally LOL, like audibly laughed at some points. I got a little misty eyed near the end. It was just so perfect. And it reminds me of the live action version. So I'm going to spoil just a little bit. It reminds me of the live action version of like the holiday specials that Marvel used to put out like back in the 90s. I know they still kind of do it now, but like back in the day, every year there was a holiday special, each issue filled with little short stories of, different characters around Christmas time. It reminded me of the live action version of that. It wasn't a full length movie, but it was longer than a TV show. And it was just a fun little side story.
Right.
It didn't move the needle on the MCU, but it didn't need to. It was just a fun little, just something to bring a joy to your face, during the holidays. I mean, I loved every single second of it. It was fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what made this so much fun and so exciting, I think, is the word I'm looking for, in terms of how campy it is because it's a holiday movie, right? Like when we think of holiday movies, it's going to be campy. And I think this really leaned into it. But it's still a James Gunn film. It still had that vibe. It still had, a lot of those, funny quirks. It had, just like what you talked about with the comic holiday specials and things like that. It had like those little, short stories that just had a lot of fun with the holidays. But at the same time, as you mentioned, it did kind of push forward the MCU a little bit. So now we know that, again, spoilers ahead here. Rocket finally got Bucky's arm, which that's going to be a whole speculation.
Which we don't know how, but I want to know.
Yes, I know. It'd be interesting to see if that's his actual arm or if that was like a prototype that somebody got,
Yeah,
So
or maybe Nebula just got it at like a prop replica store or
yeah,
something like that.
exactly. Yeah. So, we have that Mantis is Star-Lord's half brother, half sister.
Yeah. That was the
And
most interesting thing because like there was a lot of speculation around that after Guardians 2.
right.
But it was oh, that shot right there, that looks like Ego with one of Mantis's people. Could it be?
Mm-hmm.
But it was never ever confirmed, and after
Right.
a while people just stopped talking about it. And when she said that, or when they said it, I was like, wait a second, are they confirming that? And so
Right.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah. 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 And the other thing that they had touched on that kind of impacts the MCU a little bit is the fact that they had mentioned they bought Nowhere from the Collector.
yes.
And so that confirms that the Collector had survived, the whole events of Infinity War and Endgame.
Hmm.
And I don't know. Obviously, we don't know if he was snapped away or not, but clearly he survived it in the sense that he was still around after he was snapped away, if he
Yeah.
was. And so he's still in the MCU. They own Nowhere, so they have like a place that they live in. So it'll be interesting to see how Guardians of the Galaxy 3 fits that in there with owning that place now and people living there and all that.
Yeah, and I hope they do because Nowhere is such a cool place. It's the
It
the
is.
head of a dead celestial, and
Yeah.
yeah, but I agree. I was like, wait a second, did they say they bought it from the Collector? That's kind of a big thing to just sort of mention in a sort of one-off special. But I was
Oh
cool
yeah.
with it. I mean, I just thought it was so. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they actually, even if they do even reference it at all in the next Guardians. Surely they have to, right? Or I don't. I guess
I
we'll see.
mean,
But it's
they
interesting.
could. Yeah, they could not. Here's the thing is we don't know when that would happen either, because if you think about the Hawkeye series last year, Clint said that the Avengers Tower got sold off by Tony.
Yeah.
And we don't know what happened, like who bought it and all that. So we just have no idea, to this day who it is. And there's still a lot of speculation about, could it be the next Baxter building for the Fantastic Four? Could it be, Kingpin? Could it be
Yeah.
like, Oscorp or anything like that? And yeah, so it could be one of those things where they might not bring it up for who knows how long after
Yeah,
that.
maybe.
So
That Avengers Tower thing, they've mentioned it so many times
mhm.
um over the last what was it, Spider-Man Homecoming, when they first talked about it, and that was like in 2017, I think. So
Right,
they've mentioned it too many times for it not to be a thing, for it
right.
not to be revealed or whatever in the future. So I think we're going to get more of that. That's going to get revealed. If it was
Yeah,
just a one-off thing and they've never mentioned it again, then okay, whatever. They just needed a new base. But
right.
they've mentioned it several times, so it's like that's going to come up at some point.
Yeah, it's got to. Yeah. So, yeah. So anyway, so yeah, the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special is really great, and I think everybody who watched it really loved it. I haven't really heard anything negative towards that special, and I really think special is going to be the future of MCU, for them to tell stories without having to dedicate a whole series to it, especially if there are stories that they want to tell, but they're not quite sure if they want to like have a full movie or a full
Yeah.
series to it. Like this one was really successful. Werewolf by Night was really good. I think those may have been the only two that they've had so far. And I think, it says something about how, they've probably been able to save on the budget, but has been, really popular with people on, being able to, really enjoyed those. And I know they're talking about, doing the same thing with Nova and I think a couple
Hmm.
other properties as well too. So,
Yeah, they're 2 for 2 on special presentations, and
mhm.
I just say just keep doing it until they start all being horrible or something. But yeah,
Mhm.
like you said, that's a perfect way to introduce, if they want to introduce like Nova, Richard Rider, but they don't really feel like they can squeeze a whole movie out of it.
Right.
Just give us a quick little 45-minute special. That's all we need. We can all accept the fact that, oh, this is a character. Even like the people don't read comics, they can accept that, oh, this must be a new character who has some kind of powers, and we're going to
Mhm.
get a brief little introduction, and then that's it. So
Right.
yeah, these things are great. Like I think I don't think the MCU needed a shot in the arm, but because I think it's still going strong. But these are a nice extra thing. So you got
Yeah.
the TV shows and the movies, and I think these are just a welcome addition too.
Oh yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I think these are just going to be just another fun way for them to be able to tell and explore stories
Yeah.
that, I was talking about this in another episode that I recorded, is that I think the series of special presentations are really cool because it's their way of being able to take risk without affecting like the cinematic
Yeah.
timeline necessarily. Like they can definitely have an impact if they wanted to, but when you look at a lot of those stories, a lot of those shows, with the exception of a few, like Loki obviously is impacting the MCU as a whole and all that, but something like Hawkeye, they haven't really impacted anything in the main continuity of the cinematic films for MCU by any means. And so I think this was just a really good way for them to be able to tell and explore more stories without having the worry of, if I, include this in there, is that going to, mess up anything that we're trying to tell and everything. So,
Yeah, I mean, if and even like like the Werewolf by Night one, that kind of reminds me, or any other ones that aren't like Christmas themed, like those
right.
remind me of like one shots. Like
Yeah.
we get all kinds of one shots all the time where they just want to tell one single story and then they want to be
Hmm.
done. Like they're the live action equivalent of just a one shot comic book, and that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a perfect description for that. That's
Yeah,
exactly how it operates. So,
yeah.
all right. Well, let's go ahead and switch from talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special to comic books that are at least involved with or centered around the holidays on some level. And what we're going to do is Matt and I are going to share, some of our favorite 2 or 3 comics that are holiday themed. And what's funny is, as he and I were exchanging what our favorite ones were, both of us had this particular issue on our list, and that is 2018 Deadpool issue number 7. Now, Matt, do you want to explain what that issue is about and kind of just give us a description of that?
Yeah, definitely. So it's funny that I picked this one because I don't like Deadpool. I don't like comic book Deadpool.
I was
I'm
about to
not a
say, I remember you
yeah,
saying that, and that
yeah,
really surprised me.
I'm just not a fan of the comic Deadpool because I think he's too like there's too much useless chatter that never pushes the story for. It's exhausting. It's exhausting to
Right.
read. But this one was fun. So basically, a group of kids come to Deadpool and hire him to kill Santa Claus because Santa didn't leave them any presents.
Right.
And he was a little bit reluctant to do it, but he did it. And he went up to the North Pole and he finds sort of like a scrawny, like naked Santa, kind of drunk and everything, and
Mm-hmm.
sort of down on his luck Santa. He's like, "What's going on?" And it turns out one of Santa's elves um, turned on him and convinced all of the elves to go work for Roxxon Toys. So
Yeah.
Santa's all depressed because all of his buddies and all of his workers left. And then Deadpool then goes and tracks down. I think the elf's name is Tinsel. So then
Yes.
Deadpool
Yeah.
goes and tracks down Tinsel and ends up killing him. And the elves realize what's going on, and they all go back to Santa. And then at the end, it's really nice it's fun because uh, Santa's still not. He's happy to get his elves back, but he's still not in the right frame of mind to deliver presents yet. So Deadpool does it, and so
Right.
there's a nice shot of him in the sleigh dropping presents over the thing, and I just thought it was really fun. The art was good. I was like, this is if all Deadpool books were like this, then I would probably read it. And
Yeah.
maybe they are, man. Like maybe yeah, because I don't read it, so I might be missing a lot of great stuff. But I just thought
Mm-hmm.
that one in particular was really fun.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was a lot of fun. And one of the things I wanted to point out in that issue is, before Deadpool got to see Santa, he is greeted by Mrs. Claus with
Oh, that's
a
right.
shotgun or something like that.
That's right.
And Deadpool's like, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah.
So he has to, at least, I forget if he like just takes the gun away or if he just like gives her like a really hard punch to kind of like knock her down a little bit. But it just seemed like it's a combination of Die Hard and like all the violent Christmas movies that are out there that kind of combined into the single issue. And so it's
Yeah.
definitely one that is very Deadpool like. And speaking of, special presentations and one shots, I could totally see this one being a special presentation that they do for a holiday, for Marvel. And they would probably have to make it PG-13 so they have like a bigger audience and all that. But I
Yeah.
can see this being something like, maybe not to this extent, but having Deadpool saving Christmas on some level, because this is not the only time he's done this. He's done this in a couple other issues that I've read as well too. And so Deadpool somehow is always ends up being the person that they call in to save Christmas on
Yeah.
some level. So, but that's really fun. But yeah, I really enjoy that issue as well. And again, because it's Christmas, centric, and it's very much a Deadpool type of comic. The fact that they, came up with a story about how Tinsel didn't just convince the elves to like stop working for him, but he lied to them because he wanted to get more money from all
Oh,
these
that's right.
businesses that
Yeah.
was going to Santa, trying to, say, hey, can we like have a special deal with you where, if we pay you like so much money, then we can get our stuff out there first or whatever. And of course, Santa's not about the money, so he doesn't accept or anything. But Tinsel was really upset, and he was like kind of like the head elf and everything. And
Yeah.
so it's just kind of interesting to see the commercialization of Christmas kind of being involved with that, and that one the elves end up wanting to capitalize on that as well too. So yeah, so that was a really fun issue. So I'm really glad that we both talked about that. And one thing I did forget to mention is that as we're talking about any of these comics, if you want to find out more about them, I will put a link in our show notes. It is a list I've started creating on League of Comics Geeks that has pretty much all the holiday comics that you can find. And so all the ones that we're going to talk about today are going to be on it. And then ones that I have been reading and others that people have suggested as well too will be on that list as well. So if you are interested in any of these, definitely check out the show notes, and there'll be a link that'll say, list of holiday comics, and it'll give you the whole list there. So,
Yeah.
so that's Deadpool number 7. Matt, let me go ahead and kick it back over to you and ask you, what was one of the other books that you wanted to talk about today?
Yeah, so one of the ones I like is Sensational She-Hulk number 8. So this is like the John Byrne She-Hulk, the fourth wall breaking and everything.
Mm-hmm.
This one's from 1989.
Okay.
This one is about She-Hulk is hired to don't remember if it was defend or prosecute a guy who had been accused of killing 6 people.
Okay.
And so, that sounds, that's not a Christmas story, but she gets approached by this little guy. His name is Nicholas St. Christopher.
Uh-huh.
So this one isn't exactly Santa Claus, but he's got the big white beard. He's got sort of the magical powers and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So he comes to her and says that he can help her. I guess she was prosecuting because he helps her prove the case, and he takes her to this apartment, and they can't get in. So he just like magically gets them in by shooting them down the chimney.
Mm-hmm.
And they find evidence linking they find evidence of the 6 people who had been killed in that apartment, but she can't link the apartment to the guy.
Okay.
So Nicholas St. Christopher then just zaps them to Australia, and he just knows of this woman who lives there, who is the ex girlfriend of the
Mm-hmm.
guy. And she said, well, yeah, the reason you can't link it is because that's my apartment, but he was living there, and I'll testify to that. So without Nicholas St. Christopher, who is essentially Santa Claus in this, she
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have been able to, get this bad guy off the streets and get him into jail. But I don't know why. The fun thing about this issue is, and I don't know why I like this so much, but Nicholas St. Christopher, little old sweet Santa Claus, is also kind of a perv. And all throughout the issue, he's perving on She-Hulk, and because he's about as tall, like up to her waist, so he's always
Okay.
got like his face in
Yeah.
unflattering places on her, and he's always just sort of creeping on her. And at the
Right.
end, he's like, hey, now that this case is over, we should, and but then Mrs. or I don't, she's not called Mrs. Claus, but his wife comes in,
Uh-huh.
who is essentially Mrs. Claus, and then she threatens She-Hulk to say, I'll show you, if you touch my man, you'll get what you deserve. And so I just thought it was hilarious that the character supposed to be Santa is perving on She-Hulk, and his
Right.
wife gets all mad, like he helped her, but he's also like kind of a creep, and
Right.
just it just fits the tone of that series so well. And it's
Mm-hmm.
only issue number 8, so they were really going hard into or they were still finding their footing, I guess, for like the fourth wall breaks and all the humor and stuff, but it fits perfectly. And I just thought, every time he would make a pass at She-Hulk was hilarious.
Yeah. But I feel like that's pretty much the epitome of like late 1980 comics of
Yeah,
that kind of storytelling. So
especially any issue of She-Hulk from that era, from that run.
yeah.
They were looking for any excuse to get her in like torn clothes or anything
Right.
like that. So
Yeah.
this fits in with that perfectly.
Yeah. Awesome. I have not read that one yet, so I have Marvel Unlimited, so hopefully it's
Yep,
on there.
it is. It
Okay,
is.
perfect, good. So
Yep.
I'll definitely make sure to give that a read before the holiday is over and everything,
Mhm.
and that way I can enjoy it.
It's really
um,
fun.
well, good, good.
It's a one and done story, and it's really fun.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like a lot of the holiday specials, or even if it's not a holiday special, it's an issue that is centered around Christmas. Is that it
Yeah.
seems like it's unofficially its own self-contained story,
Yep.
because the Deadpool one and then the Spider-Man Deadpool issue that I also read, seemed like it was just its own story. Like he didn't have to know what was going on and going into it. And then when it ended, it seemed like it wrapped things up and it continued as part of a larger series. And so I think
Yeah.
that's something that I was also very surprised when I was looking into this, is that how many holiday issues there have been. I don't know if it's just because I just haven't paid attention or anything like that, but there's like a whole list of just holiday specials that dates back even like way back in the 60s of just
Mhm.
having a dedicated holiday issue with, a particular character or series of characters and things like that. And so it's really fascinating to see how many of those just in DC and Marvel exists. And then I know like the other companies, have a whole series of holiday specials as well too. So
Yeah.
yeah. The next one I had on my list is, and this is my second favorite one that I have, is called Batman Noel. Have you read this one?
Yes. Oh my gosh, how did I not even think about that? I just read that, last Christmas, I think I read it for the
Oh,
first
did
time.
you?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. So I bought this book at C2E2 earlier this summer because I've heard about it, but I never read it, and I
Yeah.
just read it like this past week in preparation for this episode. And I gotta tell you what, it's a genius way of telling a story and combining it with the classic Christmas Carol story. So for
Mhm.
those of you who haven't read it, basically it's taking the story of Batman and putting a spin of a Christmas Carol by using Batman as Scrooge, basically. So, what I really love about this book is that it's a retelling of the story, but it still have like the main like parts of it. It talks about the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. They weren't really ghosts, but they were characters that pretty much reminded him of those particular time periods. So Catwoman was supposed to be, Ghost of Christmas Past because she reminded him of, when he first started out as Batman and why he was doing all this and things like that. And so it's really interesting way because I would never have thought about Batman being Scrooge because when it first started, the story, you don't know who Scrooge is necessarily until like maybe 10 pages in, or
Yeah.
maybe not that far in, but maybe like a 4 or 5 pages. Then when you find out that's Batman, it just started to make a lot of sense of like, yeah, Batman could really be told as an Ebenezer Scrooge and its own story. And so it's a really creative way of combining those two stories. But the artwork was really good as well, especially the lettering. Because what I really loved about the lettering here is that the narration, is being told by, I'm not going to spoil it for people who want to read it, but it's being told by somebody in the story. And the narration is not in its own like separate bubble or separate word space like you see in some of the other comics. It's just kind of like almost like written on top of it. And
Yeah.
so it was a really cool way to be able to tell the narration side and then seeing the dialogue unfold between the characters as well too. But it was just a really cool adaptation of A Christmas Carol using some established characters in DC Comics without sacrificing any other two. So like I felt like these are the things that the characters would do if it wasn't a Christmas Carol adaptation, and it still fit very perfectly with that story. And so I really like the creativeness of it and just how it's a really cool adaptation of a classic story that I think adaptations are really hard to do when you're trying to tell something new as with a story like A Christmas Carol because it's been done like so many times. And so this one is an adaptation that was just a really different kind that you haven't really seen done before. And I think they just kind of hit out of the park with this one. I think the person who wrote it and did the art for it is Lee.
Lieber
Uh,
Mayo.
yes, thank you, Lee
Yeah. He's
Maho. So
fantastic. Holy
yeah, and
cow.
yeah, and I think that's probably that may have been the first work of his that I've read, and I mean, it blew me away just how good it is. And the book, like if you get the actual physical copy, the book is really cool. It's just it's one of my favorites by far.
Yeah, so he did another Batman Black Label book. I wanna say it may have been the first Black Label called Batman Damned. And,
Okay.
that came out after, so Noel came out before Black Label was a thing. It came out like not a long time ago, but quite a few years ago.
Hmm.
And then Batman Damned came out just a few years ago with the advent of Black Label. But I read Batman Damned before Noel, and I didn't like Batman Damned at all. And I was like,
Hmm.
oh gosh, I'm worried that I'm not going to like Batman Noel either. But
Hmm.
I read it because I've heard so much about it over the years. Like it's a classic story and I loved it. And I don't know if if I'm just not smart enough, or if their use of A Christmas Carol was really subtle. But I didn't even realize until like the sort of future part of the story out that clicks. Wait a minute, this is A Christmas Carol. I didn't realize that through like the first 2/3 of the story, and then
Right.
so like like you said, you could read this as just a Batman DC story without any other connections, and it still works perfectly. But yeah, it just
Mhm.
clicked. I was like, wait a second, and then I thought I was really smart for a second to figure that out. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, wait a minute, I think I was supposed to know that like way before. But yeah,
Well,
they just did such a great job of that.
yeah, and I just knew it was supposed to be like some sort of Christmas Carol tie-in somehow.
Mhm.
I just know that people said it's a Christmas Carol type of story, but I didn't know like how exactly what people meant by that. So I just kind of when I went in, I was expecting to look for those things,
Yeah,
but yeah, I can see if like somebody went in blind and not even knowing anything about the story, how because it's so subtle that you probably may not have picked it up if you weren't thinking about the fact that this is a Christmas or holiday book and that it's centered around a Christmas Carol that
yeah,
you wouldn't really put the two together because again, there aren't actually ghosts in the
right.
story. It was just characters that represented those time periods for those characters. So
Yeah, that's a great. I mean, that's like probably one of the best picks you could pick. Right? Is
yeah.
that's so good.
Oh yeah, yeah. So, all right. So, what is your last book that you wanted to discuss that is holiday centered?
Yeah, so I showed this a second ago. So this is the Marvel Holiday Special from
Hmm.
1991. Now I don't think this is on Marvel Unlimited unless they've added it within the last little bit. So that's why I
It's
brought
not
my copy down here.
because I've been
Uh,
wanting to read that and I
yeah,
can't find it. Yeah.
yeah. So this is one of those. This was my original copy that I got when I was a kid, and
Hmm.
this is one of those that has several different. I mean, like there's a there's a Ghost Rider Christmas story, which is pretty cool. But
Hmm.
so this is one of those that has like several short stories in it. But specifically, my favorite one is the very first one, and a lot of people talk about this story because
Hmm.
this is the one that, and I don't know how much canon this is, but this is the one that confirms that Santa Claus is a mutant
Yes.
and the world's most powerful mutant. But again, it's just I don't know if this is really canon or not, but like the
Right.
X-Men go to the mall, and it's a short story. It's only like 4 or 5 pages, but they run
Hmm.
into the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants there. And this is classic, like, this is the Blob and Toad, and this is the classic sort of like Claremont X-Men with Wolverine and Colossus and Nightcrawler, Storm and Banshee. And they
Hmm.
just sort of battle the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants at the mall. And then but they go to the mall. The X-Men go to the mall because Cerebro has detected a mutant who they
Right.
say is the most powerful mutant ever, but they can't find him anywhere. And then they get in the fight with the Brotherhood. And then during that fight, the Brotherhood turn into like little like action figures.
Hmm.
And they're like, "What in the world? How did that happen?" And then they're approached by Santa Claus, who they think is like a mall Santa or whatever. And
Hmm.
he never really says, "Hey, it was me. I did it." It's just real. He's just real cryptic. And then he sort of like teleports them back to the school, their school, and that was it. And they're like, "Oh wow, that was." Oh no, he doesn't teleport them back to school. He teleports them out to Rockefeller Center,
Oh, okay.
um, where they actually meet up with Cyclops and Jean Grey, and that actually ties into um, I don't remember which issue of X Men, but it's one of the Claremont Byrne era.
Hmm.
Whichever issue that is, the very beginning, the X Men, Wolverine and Banshee and Nightcrawler and all those guys, they're with Jean and Cyclops in Rockefeller Center. So
Hmm.
this story is a lead in to that, although this didn't come out until years later.
Right.
But yeah, it was never really confirmed. They never really figured out who was the powerful mutant and what happened to the Brotherhood. But there's a couple little panels of Santa just kind of winking at the camera, and
Yeah.
that it's just really fun. And I
Yeah.
didn't know until I think last year when I read, because I read this every year. I don't think I knew until last year that it actually did butt up against one of those older classic issues of X-Men, and then I went on Marvel Unlimited and looked. I was like, holy cow, there it is, the very first page. They're all together in Rockefeller Center, so you could
Yeah.
read this right through and make a full story. But it's
Oh,
just
that's
really
cool.
fun. It's just a fun
Hmm.
classic X-Men, classic Marvel holiday story.
Yeah. Yeah. I I had that on my list to read because of the fact of what you had said that this was supposedly how they confirmed that Santa's not just a mutant, but I was told like he was a mega level mutant. I guess I didn't realize
Yeah.
he was the world's powerful
Well,
mutant.
yeah, I don't know if they had they had the term Omega level back then,
Right.
but yeah, they talked about him being, um, according to the mutant detecting Cerebro, it's tracked the most powerful mutant ever registered.
Gotcha.
We must determine if this mutant be friend or foe,
Right.
and then that's what makes them go to the mall because that's where
Not
he is
if
apparently.
they're naughty or nice.
That's right, exactly. Yeah,
That's
so
awesome.
that story is really fun.
Yeah, I've got to start looking to see if there's a physical copy because I was hoping to be able to read it on Marvel Unlimited, and since it's not on there, like I definitely want. I wonder if my library might have it, because they have
Yeah,
digital issues all the time, so I might check there as well. So, but yeah,
yeah,
that's definitely. I think when people talk about holiday centered comics, that's definitely one of the ones that always come up is the issue of Marvel where they had Santa as a mutant and all that. So
yeah.
yeah. For my favorite holiday centered comic book is the story that comes out of Boom Studios by Grant Morrison and Dan Mora,
Oh
Klaus.
yes.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, fantastic.
It is really good. So what's for those of you who don't know what this story is about, it's basically kind of an origin story of the person that has created the myth of Santa Claus, right? And so like what Santa Claus is and all that, they created a story about like his origins. And so it is I mean, how would you describe this, man? It's kind of like a it's like it takes place in like Scandinavia in like the
Hmm.
1600s type of thing.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
I thought I thought it actually was like the person who became Santa, or like Saint Nicholas or Chris Kringle. Like that's who he
right,
is. It's not just
right.
a, yeah.
Yeah, so this
But
is like
like,
telling the origin story of that person, basically.
yeah, yeah, of
Yeah,
how he comes into that. But he's
right.
younger. He's a young guy. He's got black hair and a black beard, and it's actually like it's got action in it. It's got sword fights and daring do, and him sneaking into castles and
Yeah.
rescuing people, and it's basically it's been a couple years since I've read it. But basically these people are living in this oppressed kingdom, and
Mhm.
kids, there's a lot of poor people, and kids aren't allowed to have presents, or they can't get presents and things like that. So he
Mhm.
actually sneaks in to this castle and gives kids gifts, and they're not supposed to have them, and things like that. And so it's almost like a sort of like he almost kind of like a Robin Hood type thing where he's battling this evil
Yes.
regime, sort of.
Right.
And there's several different Klaus, or is it Klaus or Claus? Like you want to say it looks
Yeah,
like
that's the thing
Klaus,
about
but if it's
comics is you don't
Claus,
know how to pronounce them. Yeah.
yeah.
I think I
But
think
there's
either way
several,
works. Yeah.
yeah. But there's several stories, several different books, several different stories, and
Mhm.
they're just, oh my gosh, they're just all great. And I Dan Mora is my favorite artist working in comics right now.
Mhm.
And I just think anything that he pencils, that that story is enhanced like tenfold. Like if
Right.
it could be the best story, but if he's penciling it, it's the best story times 10.
Right.
So him penciling it just even makes it, just knocks it even further out of the park. It's just so good, and it's
Mhm.
fun to read all the different stories because you do see him sort of get older and older, and you sort of see how he kind of retires or whatever, and becomes the Santa Claus that we know, delivering toys to kids, and it's wonderful.
Right. Yeah. And what you hit on the head that it's like a Robin Hood type of story. So I think
Mhm.
what I was looking for is that the genre it fits in is kind of like that medieval fantasy type of thing,
Yeah, yes, yeah, absolutely.
So if you love medieval fantasy, this is right up your alley in that it has a lot of those elements in it. It has a very magical element in there. It has, those medieval battles and things like that. And they do a lot of great jobs of like connecting some of those origins of Santa to this person. And I think like his name was Claus or Klaus, and like that's where they got the name from. So they kind of explained like how the name kind of developed over time. And so what's really cool about this is that we have this whole like limited 7-issue series that kind of explains the origins, and then there's like I think 3 or 4 single issue shots of like
Yeah,
more stories about him that kind of takes place in different times. And one of the
yeah,
ones I absolutely love is called like Christmas and Xmasville, and it's basically Santa having to come in and stop this corporation from, taking over Christmas, and it's basically poking fun at how commercialized Christmas has gotten by not, explicitly saying like Coca-Cola company, but like, they have like some sort of soda company that is
Mhm.
running the city that ends up, having its own North Pole that's people can pay money to go to and stuff like that. And so they have all these little stories, and then they had just announced that they're going to be releasing a collection of all those things on Kickstarter, where Boom Studios are taking all those stories and putting like a
Yes.
nice bound
Mhm.
book. And so I've already ordered that because this has been my favorite holiday themed story. But even if it wasn't holiday themed, like, it was just a really well done story that I think anybody would enjoy, whether it was holiday themed or if it's something that was more fantasy or genre. It's a really good example of how a comic can really be successful and really be engaging, and you don't have to think about, is it coming from DC or Marvel, the two powerhouses? Because this is a great story that is just fresh, it's brand new, no one's really, done this sort of thing before, and it's just really a great story. So it's definitely on my top list of, if there's a comic that anyone would ask me, what should I read that's holiday centered, I would definitely select this one and suggest that to them.
Yeah, for sure. That is such a great pick, and I'm glad you mentioned that collected edition because the only thing about this book is I think I bought all of them on Comixology. There was a big, like holiday sale a few years ago, and I bought them all.
Hmm.
But it's not really negative, but there's like we said, there's several different ones, and it's hard to keep track of them all because there's the
Yeah.
main story, but then like you said, there's a bunch of one shots, and I think there's one that has three stories in it, and so it's a little bit tricky if you want to read all of it to figure out, yeah, do I have them all, or what's the master list of them? So that
Hmm.
collection, if it indeed does have every single one, then that's a perfect comic to have.
Right.
If because I mean I love my collected editions, trade paperbacks and hardcovers and stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've got to get on that too because if it's got everything in it, then
Hmm.
having all those great stories in one book, phenomenal.
Oh yeah, and they have different tiers of the kind of bounding you can have as well too. So
Okay.
so it's like, I think material, but also like the colors and everything, and it looks really
Oh,
nice.
okay.
So they have like a gold and silver edition, and then I'm sorry, a red and silver edition. The next one is gold and red, and then the next one is like black with red,
Okay.
which is really cool. And then you can get like all these little add-ons. So you can have like a beanie, you can have a scarf with the property name on it and stuff like that. So if you ever go to the Kickstarter, in fact, I'll probably put it in the show notes as well too,
Yeah.
for the link of it. You can go in, and if you're a fan of the story, you already know what the story is about, you can get that book. But there's a lot of add-ons that you can get, like button sets, Christmas cards with the art on it, things like that. There's a lot of options you can choose from, so it's really cool to see what they're offering, because I think this is one of those stories that definitely gets slept on a lot when people, talk about stories, because we always associate it with Christmas because of who it's about, but
Yeah.
it's just a really well done story all
You could
around.
read it anytime because it's not,
Yes.
especially the main story isn't so heavy-handed in steeped in Christmas because
Right.
it's a story about a guy like we said, Robin Hood, right? So it's kind of
Right.
about that. He happens to turn into Santa or Saint Nick eventually, but like
Hmm.
I said, there's sword fights and rescuing. I think he doesn't he have to rescue or doesn't he meet his like Mrs. Clark, his wife, and so
Yeah.
there's a Robin Hood Maid Marian kind of thing, and there's
Hmm.
just so much good stuff in it. It's timeless. You could read it
Yes.
anytime.
Yes, and he eventually fights, and this is a spoiler. So if you don't want to spoil the story, then turn this off for like the next 30 seconds. But in the story, he eventually fights Krampus.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to say the least. And I don't think they ever actually call it Krampus, but
Hmm.
that's who
Yeah.
it is. So
Yeah.
yeah. So, well, I have a couple of honorable mentions real quick. One's an honorable mention. One is like, I read this, but I would not recommend it.
Okay.
So if you have any others as well, too, definitely chime in. But one that didn't make the list, but is definitely honorable mention, is the Fraction Aha Hawkeye trade paperback, because it does take place around Christmas.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's just, again, it's another one of those, like, it's a really well done story.
Yeah.
And there are some issues where, it's definitely Christmas holiday focus, and they just it's definitely centered around it. I wouldn't call it necessarily a holiday comic just because it has the holidays in it, but it's,
Hmm.
it's centered around that time. And so it's something that it's almost like what you were saying with Klaus, is that you can read at any time. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be like, solely Christmas. It just happens to happen around the holiday season. But the story kind of, spans a little bit longer than that.
Mhm.
But the one I would say that I read specifically for this episode and was kind of disappointed in is the Batman Catwoman holiday special issue.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
think I did read that one,
Yeah.
and I thought it was alright.
Yeah. I just at first when I was reading it, I didn't realize like what was happening because I thought it was supposed to be like a special, like an issue that was a single story focus, and that's not what it
Mhm.
was at all. It was more of Batman, Catwoman from like their very early childhood all the way through the dress and all that, and so every story was like 2 pages, and then it
Yeah.
would go on to like another significant time period of their lives that happened around the holiday season. So it kind of threw me off a little bit, and then when I figured out this is what was going on, this was a story, I'm like, okay, I can get behind that, I guess. I didn't like that mode of storytelling necessarily because I was confused for a while and wasn't really expecting that. And then I just didn't like how it ended with how Selena died. And
Yeah.
so it was just because it was kind of like a circle of life type of thing, because what ended up happening was that she died the same way that Bruce's mother died, and Bruce died before she did. And so it was just kind of like I guess it was just kind of a depressing holiday
It's a
story, and I
bummer.
was like,
Yeah, you don't want that
yeah,
around Christmas time, yeah.
yeah, and they had some stories where they show, very happy moments, but I just felt like Tom King must have just had a really, bad holiday experience or was going through a bad time in his life, because none of this seemed like it was very holiday, jolliness or anything, So it was one that I was really excited to read. And after I read it, I'm like, I'm okay if I, didn't keep this copy
Yeah.
anymore. It's just not one I'm ever going to like really go back to and read again. So
Yeah.
yeah. So well, we did have some people that threw in suggestions on what they enjoyed for comics that were centered around the holidays. One of them is coming from our Comic Watch team, Shasha Kaplan, who originally she was going to be on this show, but like I said, some things that came up, and then we just decided that we would do something some other time. So she's going to come on the show to talk a little bit more about Jewish representation and comics in general. But she did share her 3 favorites holiday comics, and they are Batman the Brave and the Bold number 14, which, Matt, have you read that one before?
Mm-mm, I don't think so. Or if
Gotcha.
I have, I couldn't place it, yeah.
Yeah, she said that it's an amazing story about helping others through the lens of a Jewish character in Ragman. It's a story about standing up for oneself and one's community with a small jab at Bruce Wayne.
Okay.
Which I will say that Batman Catwoman holiday special, that's how I learned that Bruce Wayne was actually Jewish, because they had mentioned that in there. So
Oh, I
I
didn't know
didn't even
that.
know. Yeah, I didn't know he was Jewish until I read that part, and I was just like, "Oh, that's interesting." I had no idea. I don't think I've ever read anything about his character being Jewish before. So,
Yeah.
she also mentioned Marvel Holiday Special 2011. And so this is a different one, but she said it has a funny story about Ben Grimes trying to get a Chinese food night on Christmas with all the other Jewish superheroes on Christmas. Ben's able to get the help of is able to help a group of orphan children for whom Christmas didn't come. It's a story about helping others as always, but it's also the only time this many Jewish superheroes have ever shared a panel together, probably the last. It
Huh.
also proves her theory that all Jewish superheroes, to some degree, know each other. So,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So, and if you don't know Sasha, she's Jewish, and she's also getting I can't remember if it's a master's or a doctorate, but she's working on a Jewish studies degree, I believe. And so,
Wow, that's
yes.
impressive.
Yeah, definitely. So, but this is really cool because I'm definitely going to put this on the list and read this as well, because I know they have talked about how there's just not a lot of Jewish representation in comics, and so this is
Mhm.
a really cool story to talk about, not just Jewish representation, but also happening like around the holidays.
Sure.
And the fact that she said that this is the one of the few times that we see so many Jewish superheroes in one panel is pretty impressive as well. And then the last one she had mentioned is DC Holiday Special number 9. It's another great Ragman story that shows the history of Hanukkah. It also shows Ragman's views on life and also includes a convo with a rabbi. Does Ragman know the rabbi is in Gotham? Probably. There aren't many known Jewish superheroes running around the DC universe as well. So
Nice.
yeah. So thank you to Sasha for sharing that. Lily also shared from Comic Watch that she loves Journey into Mystery number 632, which has Hellhound puppies and Volstagg dressing up as Santa. Have you read that one, Matt?
That one sounds familiar. I want to say maybe I read that one a year or two ago around this time when I was looking for holiday books, but I can't remember much about it.
Yeah,
That sounds familiar.
yeah, I haven't read that one either, but I will say that I've heard people talk about Volstagg dressing up as Santa in an issue. You know, one because his character very much looks and kind of acts like Santa as well.
Oh,
But I've
sure,
heard
yeah.
people talking about there's an issue where he does. So I bet you this is the one that they're talking about. So
Yeah.
and then Derbs from Comic Watch as well didn't really suggest a comic, but he said that one of his favorites is Batman Returns movie
Oh,
takes place in Christmas.
that doesn't get mentioned enough. I think I made a video about that last year. I was like, this, in the discussion of Christmas movies and
Yeah.
especially like is Die Hard a Christmas movie or not,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Batman Returns is always overlooked. That is
Mhm.
absolutely a Christmas movie for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, and that's the thing, and I'm actually going to have an episode talking about, is Die Hard a Christmas movie and all that. But that's the thing I always point out is that if you say Die Hard is a Christmas movie, then you absolutely have to include movies like Batman Returns as a Christmas
Hmm.
movie because even though it's not a traditional Christmas movie, it's a Christmas movie in the same sense of Die Hard in that it takes place around Christmas. So
Definitely, yeah.
the logic has to be applied there as well. So on Twitter, we had ODPH podcast said the Lobo paramilitary special, which have you read that one?
No, but that sounds very Christmas.
Yeah, I imagine that's very Die Hard like,
Yeah, right.
just by the name of it. But what's funny is Brian O'Neill from Comic Book Yeti on Twitter also said that same comic book, and he said that it's the best holiday comic ever. He can't change his mind on this as well.
Okay.
So the fact that someone is willing to die on that hill tells me that this has got to be a really good comic issue. So I got to read
I'll
this
have to
one.
read that. Yeah.
And then apparently ODPH has said that there's an issue called Hulk versus Santa, which I did not know about this.
I don't know. I'm gonna look on Marvel Unlimited, see if
I
it's
know. Yeah.
because it's always fun to find new like holiday,
There's
books.
I know there's a lot of them. Like I said, like I didn't think there was going to be a whole lot, but there is a lot that are out there that I'm like, I'm going to spend the whole season just reading these comics alone. So
I don't see Hulk versus Santa on Marvel Unlimited, so
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
bummer because
I
now
know.
I want to know who wins.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, and that's the same thing with the Marvel Holiday Special that you were talking about. That one's not
Yeah.
on there either. So hopefully they'll show up. But if not, I'm sure somebody probably has it pirated on a website somewhere. So
Yeah, you can probably, eBay a physical copy or something. I'm sure there's got to be something out there.
yeah. The last Comic Shop podcast said Mike Ploog's Ploog
Hmm.
adaptation of L. Frank Baum's The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus. And that one has a sword swinging St. Nicholas as well, too, apparently.
Okay. Well, shoot, I want to check that out then. Like
Yeah.
Klaus has made me want to read anything about a badass Santa,
Yeah, yeah. Well, and so L. Frank Baum is known for writing The Wizard of Oz, and I completely forgot that he wrote a book about Santa Claus, and so this will be really interesting to read this and see what that story is like too. Another one that had came up from a couple of people. This comes from Instagram Metalcore Nerds. The Long Halloween.
Okay. Partly, I mean, it takes
Not
it.
the whole book, but I think there's an issue that took place during Christmas, though.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean that whole 12 issue series takes place over the course of an entire year. So if it's a Christmas book, you could also say it's a Halloween book and a Valentine's book and a July 4th book, because the whole thing is the holiday killer and they kill on the holidays, right? So
Right.
that story covers every major holiday, So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
great story. Like one of the best. Oh my gosh, I only read it for the first time a couple of years ago. I don't know why I was so late to the party, but holy cow, such a great story.
Yeah, it's a really good just detective story, and it
Yeah.
almost reminds me of Mask of the Phantasm, the way like the mystery's set up,
Hmm.
So, but yeah, Medical Nord said it's their favorite Bat book. They love the detective feel to it, and it has awesome
Yeah.
twists throughout. Plus, it hits all the holidays, and absolutely loves that about it. So,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. So, thank you all for making your adding in your voice on what holiday comics you absolutely love. If you are interested, I was just talking to Matt about this before we started recording, but we are actually going to have a Stream Lounge watch party where we're going to watch the Hawkeye series from Disney Plus on December 14th and the 21st at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you're interested in maybe coming in and watch the show and have a conversation with us about those episodes, I will put a link in the show notes as well. So so if you're interested, definitely check this out and put that in the calendar. And I think Matt's going to try to be a co-host for those episodes as well too. Right?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna
Awesome.
give it a shot for sure. I'd love to be
Yeah,
there, and I want to rewatch all this stuff.
I know. I mean, it's now an instant, holiday must watch,
Yeah, it's
series
in the
for the.
holiday rotation for sure.
It
Yeah.
is, yes. I mean, well, and especially with the MCU, we only have those two plus Iron Man 3, and I think there's probably another one out there, but I can't remember what it is.
I mean, the end of Spider-Man: No Way Home, was
Yeah,
he was swinging above a big Rockefeller Center Christmas tree. So
I know. I guess that's like the one movie you could say that, there's only 10 seconds of Christmas in it and it's considered
yeah,
a holiday movie.
right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so if you're interested, definitely, check out the links in the show notes. It's going to be December 14th and 21st again at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And you will have to download the Stream Lounge app on your laptop or desktop. They don't have mobile apps yet, unfortunately, but if you have a computer or laptop, download the app and then you can join in the conversation. So, um, at the end of every episode that we do, we like to talk about what comics we're currently reading. And so, Matt, I want to ask you, what are you currently reading? What's in your, reading pile right now? And what do you think about what you're reading so far?
Yeah, so obviously reading my weekly pulls, Amazing Spider-Man, Daredevil, Batman, and Action Comics and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But outside of just the regular weekly stuff, so with the release of Black Panther: Wakanda Forever and the introduction into the MCU of Riri Williams,
Mm-hmm.
I realized, I've never really read too much of Riri in the comics. I want to read some of her and just sort of get to know her a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then I hadn't even read like her first appearance or anything. So I was like, I'm going to go back to her first appearance, which was in Brian Michael Bendis's Invincible Iron Man. And
Oh
I was
yeah.
like, well, that run isn't all that long, so I'm going to read that run. And
Mm-hmm.
then so I read the whole thing. Was introduced to her. She wasn't in it that much, but then I read. So then I wanted to keep going, and I read the next series of Bendis's Invincible Iron Man,
Mm-hmm.
which featured Riri Williams in the role of Iron Man. She adopted the Ironheart moniker, but she was in that role
Right.
because Tony Stark was supposedly he was supposedly dead or in a coma, but he was her AI. So I read all that, but then I started going down an Iron Man rabbit hole, and I was like, well, I haven't read the Dan Slott Tony Stark Iron Man series, so I read that. And then I was like, well, I've bought every issue of the new, which actually just ended, but the new Christopher Cantwell Iron Man series from
Yeah.
Marvel. I bought every issue, all the Alex Ross covers. They're beautiful, but I had never read any of them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm gonna just kind of keep going. So actually, just this morning, I finished the Iron Man 2020 storyline, which was the bridge between Dan Slott's Iron Man and Christopher Cantwell's Iron Man. So now, just today, I read like the first two issues of Christopher Cantwell's Iron Man, and I'm gonna sail on through all 25 of those, and then the new series is coming out. I think the first issue comes out in December.
Yeah.
So, long story short, I have been just going down an Iron Man rabbit hole
I was about to
since
say
Black Panther: Wakanda Forever came out.
that's definitely like more of a stream of consciousness going on of I just finished this. Oh, I remember reading that character. Let me just go ahead and go read that.
Yeah, well, I'm
Oh
real
my
bad too
gosh.
about if I want to read about a character, if I want to read a story, I'll find where to start, but then something will be mentioned. I'm like, well, wait a minute, what are they talking about? So then I feel like I have to go back a little bit more, and I have
Mm-hmm.
to go back and back and back and back, and I'm like, eventually, I've just got to stop and draw a line in the sand. I can't
Yeah.
keep going backwards because then I'll just wind up back in 1963 reading Iron Man #1. So
Yeah.
which I have read several of those, for my history of Marvel videos that I used to do. And
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I've just been heavy on the Iron Man, and also the I read like the first 5 or 6 issues of the Rebirth era of Deathstroke the
Oh
other
wow.
night.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I mean, I like Deathstroke, but I don't know what made me want to read those. But I just started reading those, and they're okay. They're all right. I think it's the story still needs to cook a little bit, but
Right.
been having fun with that too. So yeah, just randomness. It's fun to it's fun to not be locked into reading your weekly pulls and just being able to just read whatever.
Right.
Without being like, oh, I want to read this, but I've got a stack of 20 books that I bought last week that I haven't touched. I really should go read those.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really fun to not be committed to anything. Just like I feel like reading an Iron Man book from 6 years ago. I'm going to go do that.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
it's fun to have that freedom.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, I
Yeah.
I will admit and say that my current reading list is not as elaborate as yours,
Mhm.
but for Comic Watch, I am actually going to be reading a preview of Grifter Got Ran Over by a Reindeer.
Yeah, that comes out on Tuesday.
Yes, it does. So
Yeah.
I have it in I need to read it. I've been meaning to read it, and we've just been busy all weekend. So I'm probably going to try to get it in tonight. If not, read it tomorrow because I got to get the review in by Monday night
Yeah.
before it comes out officially. But the other one I'm just started because I just wrapped up Batman Beyond and the latest issue of Dark Knights of Seal. So now I'm
Oh,
actually going to start Superman Son of Kal-El, which I've
yes.
read the first few issues and then got away from it because I was like, well, I'm going to wait until the series is done. And I didn't realize that they don't have an end issue plan. So I'm like, all right, I just got to sit down and read all these issues that came out so far. Then I'll just keep, reading the issues that gets released every month and all that. So I'm going to be starting that here pretty soon.
Well, actually, it is ending. So issue 18, which comes out
Oh, is it?
very soon. Yeah, it's ending with
Oh,
issue number
okay.
18.
Okay.
Um, they've released the first 17, so it's got
Right.
one more, and then it's done. And then John Kent is actually getting his own miniseries early next year with all this new Superman status quo stuff.
That's right.
The
Yeah.
um, the
Yeah.
Adventures of Superman featuring John Kent Superman. I think
Right.
it's a 5 or 6 issue miniseries. So yeah, there is um, you know, I don't know if you'll be done with the first 17 before the 18th issue comes out, but yeah,
Probably not.
there's a set 18 issues right there that yeah you can just dive into and read them all.
Oh, perfect. Well, that's going to be perfect timing then. So, yeah, I just remember when I first started collecting them, they said there wasn't an end issue in mind or set yet or
Mhm.
anything like that. So I was just kind of going off of that. So that's good to know that
Yeah.
it's actually wrapping up now. So that's is perfect time for me to start with that. So
Yeah, I like that series a lot too. I've been
yeah,
reading that's on my pull list. Like as they come out, I read them, and I really liked it.
yeah. The first few issues I read, I absolutely enjoyed them, and like I said, I wanted to wait until all of them came out because I just have a really bad memory of what did I read last
Oh
month.
no, I'm with you for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's why I like collected editions so much, is because I can't remember from one week to the next. Like, wait, what did I just read? And
I know.
uh,
Yeah.
I think I read Do a Power Bomb. Are you reading that?
I have
With
not yet.
Image?
No, I've
Oh,
from
it's
hearing great things, but I have not started reading that yet.
yeah. I caught up on it yesterday, and as I
Mhm.
started reading, I was like, wait a minute. What are they talking about? And I had to go digging through my box to pull out the last issue and reread that one because I couldn't
Yeah.
remember. So yeah, that's why I prefer trades and collected editions, because then you can just read it all at once. It's like
Yeah.
binge watching a TV show, I mean, that's way more
That's
fun.
exactly what it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I've been kinda doing is I've been collecting these issues, and then when I know that the last issue is coming out soon, that's when I go back and start reading the issue, so that way I can read it back to back and have all that fresh in my mind as I'm reading them, so that way I don't forget about them in between months, so
Yeah.
yeah. Well, some of our listeners have said, have shared what they are reading, and from Comic Watch, B Rats has said Superman Up, Up and Away. Have you heard this series?
Um is that the Tom King one?
It's Jeff Johns and Kurt Busiek.
Kurt Busiek. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I have not. I've heard the red and blue one and some of the other ones, but this when B Rats shared this,
Oh.
I have honestly say I have not heard about this one yet. So.
Yeah, so it's a story. It's not really its own story. It's just part of it
Mhm.
was a story told in Action Comics and Superman, like a
Okay.
6 issue thing. I'm familiar with it, but I haven't read that. No.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, they said that they're loving it. This is the arc where we see the upcoming Superman writers, Busiek and Johns, come aboard and set up a mission statement. It's in that era where we just finished Infinite Crisis, where
Yeah.
everyone seems to get a return to the status quo. So yeah, I gotta say, like I don't know if you know my story or anything like that, but I just got back into comics like 5 years ago, so I'm trying to get
Mhm.
caught up on everything. So when people are talking about all these stories and arcs and things like that, I'm always thinking in my mind, that sounds great. I wish I knew anything about it. So
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's why. I mean, I've been reading for over 30 years, and there's still stuff like I just now.
yeah,
I was like, wait, I don't know that story. I had to Google it, and
Yeah.
There's just nobody can know everything, right? There's just so I wouldn't feel bad
Hmm.
or anything. Like there's just so much
Yeah.
out there that nobody can know all of it.
X-Men and Batman alone, I feel like will be an overwhelming process to try to get caught up on all those, let alone all
Yeah,
the other comics are out there.
yeah, for sure.
Um, again from Comic Watch, Miriam Herrera said Red Hood Outlaws. She's really
Okay.
enjoying the depth and characters in the webtoon so far. So this is a webtoon series.
Oh, I've read a couple of those, and that was interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, I have not read that one, but the one on webtoon I have read is I think it's called like the Bat Family or something like
Batman
that.
Family. Yeah, I've read a little bit of
Batman
that
Family
too.
Adventures.
That's it. Yeah.
Yes, and it's really good. I really
Yeah,
like
that's
that one.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to check out Red Hood Outlaws as well too. I didn't realize they did a series for it, Red Hood. So from our Discord channel, which if you are not part of our Discord, I'll put that in the links in the show notes as well too. We have a Discord channel where a lot of fans just come and talk about the things that we love, which is comics, movies, any kind of fandoms and things like that. From our Discord channel, we have Joe Loves Comics shared that he's reading Black Science Volume 3. I don't know if you read that one,
I read the
Matt.
first couple issues when they
Okay,
came out, but yeah, I don't know much about it at all.
gotcha. He said
I've
he
heard good
loved it.
things though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he said he loved it. I think last week he said he was finishing up as well too. Human Target number 9, he absolutely
Mhm.
loved. And Tim Drake and Robin number 3, Vanish number 3. He said that it's okay. He's not really feeling it. You can definitely see why some people are liking it more than him, though. And then he's definitely excited to check out Department of Truth number 22. And what's the furthest place from here, number 8, which is interesting because if you don't know Human Target or Department of Truth, I think both of those are DC Comics stories.
So Department of Truth is Image.
Image, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, but Human Target is DC.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I haven't read those, but just hearing people talk about them, they actually sound really interesting. And what I love about Human Target and DC Comics is that it sounds like it's a really well done story that it involves some of the popular DC Comics, but it's not centered around a well known character, if I remember correctly. So it sounds like it's a really cool story if you want to read something from a major publisher, but it's not the typical Batman Superman story from DC Comics. So.
Yeah, so it's I think of it as it's another Tom King joint. Like he did the Vision 12 issue series. He did
Mhm.
the one with Adam Strange Adventures, I think.
Yes, yeah. Mhm.
And he did Heroes in Crisis, which that one's pretty divisive, and I'm kind of iffy on that one. But yeah, he does all these these stories that are
Mhm.
these self-contained stories about characters that you wouldn't necessarily think would get their own story. And I read Vision and loved it. Heroes in Crisis was okay. I haven't read Strange Adventures or this one yet, but I'll
Right.
probably get this one when it's collected.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then the last two from Twitter, Byron O'Neill of Comic Book Yeti said that he read an advanced copy of Joe Death and the Graven Image, and he says it's amazing. And
Okay.
Dan Comic Concierge said that Nigel, I don't know how to pronounce this, Nigel Yad, the God Network, just finished this and loved it. A true epic science fiction adventure. That's one I haven't heard of before, but he posted some photos of some of the artwork, and the artwork looks really cool. So I just never heard of it. So I don't know. It's like Negalyod, and I don't know if that's like the author or if that's the overarching like series or something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but the subtitle is the God Network. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, Comic Concierge, he's got a great TikTok channel because like I
Mhm.
said, not everybody can know everything. He makes so many videos about comics I have never heard of before, and he
Yes.
always makes them sound interesting. So yeah, anything that he says is good, I'll try out for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's
If you're looking for people to follow to talk about comics, like his stuff is always good, and he doesn't do just comics, he'll also do pop culture commentary and things like that. I also
mhm.
know he's like a huge wrestling and baseball fan. I think definitely
Yeah.
baseball. I don't know about wrestling. I might be
He talks a lot
confusing.
about wrestling. Yeah, I usually
Does
don't
he?
watch
Okay.
those ones because I'm not a wrestling guy. But yeah,
Same
he's in
here.
that
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. So, but yeah, his channel has a little bit of something for everyone, and he's
Yeah.
definitely very knowledgeable of a lot of the comic books that are out there. So. All right. Well, thank you very much, Matt, for joining the show. Before I let you go, where can our listeners find you online if they want to follow you on social media?
Yeah, so it's the same everywhere. So Instagram or TikTok or Twitter are probably the three biggest. It's Bumpkins TV. So Bumpkins spelled like pumpkins, but with a B instead. Bumpkins TV, all one word. Twitter, Instagram, or I've got a link tree with everything in there too. So I think I'm most active probably on TikTok because I just love talking about comic books. Like I have a hard time shutting up. Like I can't even fit the 3 minutes. Like that little circle goes around. I'm like, no, wait, I'm not done yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I'm most active. I just but any of those platforms, I talk about comics pretty much all the time.
Right. Same here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll make sure to put a link to your link tree in the show notes as well too. So
Okay.
once again, thanks for coming on the show, especially at late notice. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. And,
Absolutely.
I hope we get to do this again sometime in the future.
For sure. Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm here anytime you'd like to chat. Yeah.
Awesome. And that wraps up another episode of The Captioned Life. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. You can follow us on social media at Captioned Life. For more information about us and all of our previous episodes, visit thecaptionedlife.com.